This talk is called Everything's a Product, How to Apply Product Management Practices to Technology Services. This is the longest title of any talk I've ever given. And fun fact, I was updating the speaking page on my website yesterday because I was procrastinating, and this completely threw off the alignment of every other talk that I had listed because it was too long. So I don't think I'll ever give it again, or I'll change its name. So, intro slide. So anyway, I said my name is Matt Stratton. I'm one of the founding organizers of DevOps Days Chicago, which will be in August this year. I am one of the co-hosts of the Arrested DevOps podcast. I am DevOps evangelist at PagerDuty, and as Jason said, at Datadog, it's the same story. We are hiring at PagerDuty. We do a lot of cool stuff, and I am the most dangerous DevOps evangelist on Twitter, and I don't really remember where that joke came from. Something dumb. So let me tell you a little bit before we kind of get into the how-to. I want to give you a little bit how I got here to be talking about product. Okay, there's a lot of stuff. Product's kind of a thing. A lot of us may have worked for companies that create products that are customer focused. But my background is I didn't really go into this. I'm an ops person, right? I've spent my career as a system administrator. So what the hell do I know about products, right? So let me tell you a little bit how I got here to be giving this talk. So I'm from Chicago, and I spent most of my career, pretty much all of it, working in Chicago, working in the Midwest. And in Chicago, we built some pretty amazing things, okay? They look a little funny, maybe, to people who aren't from around where we are, and people might think they're weird. But really, the problem is we become kind of rigid and dogmatic about them, and we really, really like them. And that's the same thing that happens when it comes to IT process and how we do work. So one of the things I've learned before I came to PagerDuty, I worked for Chef for quite some time. I was first a solution architect and then a customer architect, mostly focused in the Midwest. And the way that change happens in this country when it comes to technology and the way that we do business in this business of IT is it starts in the West Coast, new ideas. Then they come to the East Coast, and the banks start doing them. And then finally, in the Midwest, we go, okay, so y'all figured it all out. Now we're comfortable. And now we'll start doing it. And so that's kind of how things happen. And because of that, I've worked in a lot of traditional IT. I've worked for a lot of banks. I've worked for a lot of insurance companies. And then what happened, again, Midwest, salt of the earth, it's very traditional. Granted, this is England, but this is the best nerdy IT GIF I can find. It's also, for me, strange. This is the only animated GIF in the whole presentation, so I'm sorry about that. So I got a pretty great opportunity. I had been working for Chase, and I got an opportunity to go work for a company called Apartments.com, who was referred to as a startup at the time, although, as one of my colleagues said, when you're older than Google, I think you can stop calling yourself a startup. But Apartments.com is one of the better-known e-commerce stories in the Chicago area, and I went over there to run technology operations, was there for a few years, and we were going through a transformation to try to become more agile, as people do, because that's apparently a thing. And I got lucky, and they brought in this fellow named Marty Kagan. Has anybody heard of Marty Kagan before? If you product space you have, if not, you probably haven't, but that's cool, it's okay. I hadn't either. So they brought Marty in to talk to our software engineers and our product managers and all these people who got to work on all the cool building stuff, and somehow the server janitor manager got to be invited to the 2-day workshop with Marty. And it was really eye-opening. So Marty has built a lot of great products. He consults for a lot of companies. At the time, he was working with Living Social. Does anybody remember Living Social, by the way? They were a thing. We're going to talk about things that fail in a minute. But so Marty, a lot of things that I've learned that then I found apply to DevOps came actually from those 2 days with Marty Kagan, when it came to the idea about being able to fail, when it came from the idea of how your culture has to transform. One of the things that I'm hoping we can talk about in open space later is my current passion to jaw about, is how parts of your organization outside of technology have to change when you go through a DevOps transformation. One of the things Marty talks about is when you go through an agile transformation, the way you sell things has to change. And he gave the example of being at Living Social. He said, you're going to do prototypes. And you know what's going to happen? A salesperson's going to see that prototype, and you know what they're going to do before you know it? They're going to go sell it to somebody. And then you're going to be like, no, we were just trying something. He's like, too late, I already sold 100 of them. And guess what? Now you have to support them, and that's where technical debt comes from. So anyway, and so the way I want you to think about this is your IT services can be products. A lot of times when we think about products, we either think about things like Datadog. Datadog, not Datadog, although Datadog is also a product. But we think about things like that. We think about apps, maybe. Or we think about what we might call CPG, which are consumer packaged goods. And I can throw on marketing terms because I'm married to a marketing manager and I know what those words mean. I just learned what CPG means like a week ago. But CPG, when we think about products, we're like Tide Pods or just things you go and you buy them and those are products. But we usually don't think about experiences, but experiences are products. So we think about something like Lyft, right? We would say Lyft is a product, but Lyft is more than its app. It's its entire customer experience, right? We might, this is the reason we use the word customer experience these days is because if we say user experience, everybody thinks we mean UI and we mean JavaScript frameworks and clicky buttons and stuff like that. But the reality is user experience is different than user interface. The user interface is part of the user experience. But if we change the word and we say customer experience, then we don't get it confused with, pushy buttons and dialogues. So when we think about a product like Lyft, there's software that plays a part, but there are humans that play a part in the way that the work gets done. So when we think about our IT services, they are products, just like Lyft, just like Tinder, just like Tide Pods. They're products. So that's kind of cool. So we're going to talk about that. And you have customers in these IT services, right? You do. They may get paid by the same people that you get paid by. Y'all might go to the same Christmas party, but you do have customers. If you don't know who your customers are, go figure it out. We'll wait. Because we're not going to get much further without knowing that. There's a couple things that matter when we think about any kind of transformation. When I'm talking to folks about wanting to go through any kind of transformation, one of the first questions I'll ask, and I don't care if I'm talking to a QA analyst, a software engineer, a CIO, the first question I'm going to ask you is I'm going to say, how does your company make money? And if you don't have the answer, then go back and come back to me when you do. Now, again, someone would say, well, we're a nonprofit, we're not supposed to make. Okay, whatever. How is your company measure success? And how is that done? Because if you don't know that, you're not going to be able to solve your problems. So any IT service that we're talking about, anything that we're creating or trying to make better, it has to serve your customers. So I want to talk a little bit about some IT services that you can productize. I'm not sure I spelled productize right. I'm not sure productize is even a word. But IT services that you could make into products. So service requests. So you've got your service desk. Hey, within your IT shop, people want to get a new laptop. They need a printer turned on. They forgot their password. Those can be products. They super are products. The way that you deliver software. Hey, your DevOps transformation. Guess what? That's a product. Now, that's an idea, but parts of it are products. So the process by which you ship software is itself a product. Maybe the way you do infrastructure as code. Did I say that I used to work at Chef? I still think this way. So all of these things, all of these improvements we're making are products. And oftentimes, the reason I give these specifically is it's really easy, I shouldn't say really easy, it's less of a stretch for a software engineer who's building features to think about how they can do product better. Because they're already probably working with product managers. That's probably already part of it. Maybe you're inside of internal stuff and you don't have that happening, but you can see where it happens because you're still building a thing. People that are more on the ops side of the world, a little bit more, it's more about process, it's a little bit more of a stretch. So that's why I'm specifically talking about that. That's why I didn't put something up here like saying, like your general ledger system internal to your company. That could be one, but chances are, that makes it a little bit simpler to look at. General ledger's not simple. So I'm going to ask you to humor me through the rest of my talk. So, we've got another 20 minutes left, perhaps. So for the rest of this talk, I'm sure that every one of you could sit there and think of 100 reasons why what I'm about to talk about would not work at your company or organization. Maybe not 100, even 5, I don't know. I'll give you an example. I mean, just the way to think about this, the first time I ever really learned about what continuous delivery was, I was listening to a podcast called DevOps Cafe, and they had a fella named Jez Humble who wrote a book about continuous delivery, and was driving down the Eisenhower Expressway in Chicago, listening to it in my car, and he was explaining it, and literally I was arguing with him in my car, saying that would never work at apartments.com. Remember, I'm working at an e-commerce company. And then he goes on to progress to talk about how Hewlett-Packard did this in their LaserJet firmware division, and I felt like, okay, well, then I'm done. So what I'm asking you to do here is we can all think about why this won't work in our organization. And especially if you're an ops person, you probably are a cynic by nature, as I am. So you know what, for another, 20 minutes now? You can humor me. Emily's mom is watching to make sure that you do. Yesterday, I told Emily that I would figure out a way to get her mom into my talk. So that's Emily's mom. She's on Twitter. And like I said, yesterday I threatened to include her in the talk. And if we start lying on Twitter, then what good is that platform ever going to be? So conveniently, and I didn't know her talk, but I really liked a lot of things Emily talked about this morning tee up into this. It's okay to fail. One of the things you need to know, and you need to get really comfortable with this right off the bat when you're thinking about things of true product management, at least half of our ideas are going to fail. And in fact, Marty Kagan will tell you that high-performing product teams assume that at least 75% of their ideas are going to fail. I don't know how accurate this number is anymore, because when I heard Marty talk to us, it was quite a few years ago, but he had spent time with Google. And the Google product teams test 10 to 20 ideas a week. And they expect almost all of them to fail. Now, we're going to talk about why that matters. So again, remember, half of our ideas are going to fail, but that's okay, you're in good company. Dude, Google Wave was awesome. I really, really wish it worked. Maybe your idea is ahead of its time. Maybe it's just not good, but that's okay. The problem with all of these is it took an awful lot of time and an awful lot of money to find out that they weren't going to work. So this, because we know that at least half of our ideas are going to fail, this is why roadmaps are bad. And I kind of jokingly saying, if you have one, you should feel bad. The problem with a roadmap is the same problem we had with waterfall. So how many people are familiar with the difference between waterfall and agile? People are doing agile stuff, right? So what's one of the things that we say about why waterfall is terrible? Because we're not psychic. How the hell could we know at the beginning of a project all the things that are going to happen, right? I mean, the example I love to give about when I was at Apartments, before we did agile, at the beginning we did a site redesign. It took 18 months. Can you believe it took us 18 months to redesign our website? And at the beginning of that project, Google Chrome didn't exist. By the time we went live, it was 72% of our traffic, okay? Things change. So the thing is, so we got really smart about this as an industry. We're like, okay, well, forget this requirements waterfall nonsense. We're going to agile all this stuff up. And now all we're going to do is take our assumption and hubris that we can predict the future, and we're going to put it on a roadmap and say, this is all the work we're going to do this year. Now, how many people who work in are connected to a product organization that has a roadmap that's customer-facing have ever seen any of that stuff ship when you told your customer it would? It doesn't. All it does is make you feel crappy, right? So that's the thing. Roadmaps are not necessarily inherently bad, but what we're trying to do there is work with information we don't have. We're trying to say, this is the stuff we know. When we create a roadmap, what we're doing there is saying, not only do I know the things we should do, which you don't, because remember, at least half of your ideas are going to be terrible, but I also know how hard they're going to be and how long it's going to take to do them. You don't know that either. You don't know shit. So don't put it on a slide, especially not when you give it to customers. So you want to think about output versus outcome. And this is the thing, this is the big difference between projects and products, okay? So a lot of times, especially in IT and especially in the service kind of side of IT, we do projects, right? It's like we're gonna do the IDLE v3 installation project. We're gonna do the Windows 2008 upgrade project. They're all projects. Projects are output-based. They are, when they're done, we have a thing, and it's look how many things I did, and I did it in this amount of time. And you know what? Your business doesn't really care about the things. Your business cares about the business outcomes, right? A business outcome is we sold a lot more shit than we did last year. We made a bunch of money. We expanded into this market. We did not get disrupted by Uber. Those are actually not even really good business outcomes, but they're a lot different than we upgraded 95,000 laptops to Windows 2008. Who cares? That's not a reason to live as a person, right? But doing that may cause a business outcome. So, I'm going to talk about discovery. Discovery is a key part of products, right? So we're going to start at the beginning. So we use this word for a lot of things, you know. Sales folks like to use it. It's like what they do. You know, when a salesperson hasn't sold you something yet and they're asking you a lot of questions about what sucks to be you so they can figure out how their thing will make it suck less, that's called discovery. You're going to do kind of the same thing. So discovery is figuring out your customer's pain, your customer's problem, figuring out what they need. And discovery is hard, okay? Discovery is not go to your customer, go to your stakeholder, go to your person and say, hey, what sucks? Hey, what do you need me to do? Because you know what? They don't know what's possible. There's the old saw that Henry Ford said if he did what his customers wanted, he would have built a faster horse, okay? We don't know. We certainly don't know what we want, and we definitely don't even know what's possible. So it's not as simple as just asking. We're going to talk a little bit about some things to do about that. Another thing about discovery is, remember, it's always happening. This is, again, in Waterfall, we were like, hey, cool, we have the requirements phase, and now we're going to ask all the questions, and now we don't have to talk to these stupid customers again until we go and ask them to give us the check, right? Discovery is constantly happening, and that, because remember, it's not just a project. So we're always doing discovery, and I'm going to talk about that. It's not just for your boss or for some fancy past jerk with the name architect in his title, like me, okay? One of the actually very, what's considered controversial opinions that Kagan has is that one of the best places to go for ideas is to your engineers. This is one of those things like product managers hate him, right, on some BuzzFeed article or something like that, is with this weird trick. But it's true, because we think like, oh, engineers build things. Well, guess what? That's why they have good ideas. So remember, everybody that's part of your team can probably provide ideas. They don't know how to pick what the good ideas are. That's what the product manager's for, because you're supposed to know stuff we're going to talk about. And remember, it's not just saying, yo, what are your requirements? That's being like that guy in Office Space. Like, I take the requirements from the customers to the engineers, right? You're just writing down. Siri could do your job if that's all you do, right? In discovery, you have to establish compelling value with any product that you're creating. This is kind of hard, but without it, you're screwed. Because if there isn't compelling value to your customer, they are not going to use your product. And this makes sense. This sounds natural in the market, right? You're like, well, of course, if they don't see, value in Datadog, then they won't use it, and then we'll fail, and nobody will download it in the App Store. Great. But I don't have this problem with my new help desk process because the help desk just has to use it because their boss will make them. Yeah, they'll do it, but they won't do it very well, right? And it will fail, and you will look bad, and you will go on a plan, and you will have to go work somewhere else, which might be fine. I don't know. But the point is, it will fail in whatever fail means in that internal marketplace unless you provide compelling value to the customer. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, we have to know who our customer is, like I talked about, and you have to figure out what provides value to them. This is another one that can be tough for a lot of people in the room: the user experience over the engineering. The engineering part's a lot more fun, right? We can write some code, we can buy some tools, we can install some modules, we can do all this stuff. What really matters is we got to think about what it's going to be like for the people who are using our solution. And a lot of these people are going to be spending hours and hours a week, perhaps all day long, with this thing that you're building and you're going to be done with. So remember, these things are going to stick around, you hope, and they're going to be an integral part of someone's life. So what can you do to make it more delightful and better experience, the entire experience from the beginning to the end? Mark Andreessen has said some dumb things. This is a smart thing he said. The most important thing is to know what you can't know. We got to be humble. We don't know everything. Far be it from that. We barely know anything. So remember, most of your ideas won't work out. That's okay. No one's expecting you to be omnipresent and omniscient and know all the things. But we do stuff like this a lot, right? Think about places where in your daily work or the way you approach things or the way your organization does that fundamentally, if you distill it down, is a statement of saying, I can predict the future, okay? That's requirements-based design. That's roadmaps. That's something like, again, a lot of these product things go back, because the last time I really worked for a living was at apartments.com. Then I went out and I was a consultant and an evangelist, and I don't actually do things. But we would do A/B testing. And during an A/B test, at the time, because deployments were tough and everything, we would have a freeze. We'd say, we can't ship code during a test, right? This seems logical, because you're saying, a lot of folks would say, well, no, we can ship this because it won't affect the test. I'm like, well, if you're so freaking smart, why do we have to do the test in the first place if you know exactly what's going to impact your user? Because you don't. So remember, most of our ideas won't work out, and that's totally okay. Another thing, you want to test feasibility during discovery, because if we know that we're throwing away almost everything we do, we want to find out what's a shitty idea as quickly and cheaply as possible. Because how many people have heard the term throwing good money after bad, aka vendor management in almost every enterprise, right? I've invested in this, so we are just going to, damn it, keep going. So try to think about how you can build or implement as little as possible to find out what you need. When it comes, this can be a little harder when it's not software. Software, we're like, hey, we have mocking tools and prototyping tools and all sorts of stuff. Well, how the hell do you prototype a new method for requesting a new printer, right? Well, you know what you might do? You might sit down and draw it on paper with another human, right? Maybe you role play it. Think about what you can do that just gets the answer to your question. Do you need to have the fancy web form with the hunter green button with your logo and everything to figure out if you're actually capturing the right information? You sure don't. Walk through things on paper and involve the people that will help you know whether it's a good idea. MVP, this is a big one. You'll notice that it says minimum viable prototype. This is something I am really bad at, and it's only been recently when I was researching for this talk that I was reminded of how important this word is. It's not minimum viable product. Used to be. When we talked about it, in the industry, we'd say that. The problem is, a product is something that is production ready. A product is something you can run your business on. A product is something ready for a customer. That's not what we're talking about here. By God, no. This is just enough to understand if you should throw it away. So by changing the word, and I believe that words matter. I have a post on LinkedIn right now that's got hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of views of people arguing with me about the word DevOps engineer because I think words matter. And so they do, because it influences how we think. So if we get ourselves to say minimum viable prototype, we will make these things we feel comfortable throwing away faster. So it's something just to get a feel. So that's one big thing. Some words don't matter. This one does. Here's a bad example of an MVP. But this is a bad example, but this is how people would quote, if I asked them how they were going to MVP Chef when I worked at Chef. Well, so we're going to create an MVP for their Chef implementation so we can figure out if it's smart, right? So here's what we're going to do. The first thing we're going to do is install the Chef client on 10,000 nodes. And then we're going to write an MVP cookbook that checks to see if a file is there that we're used to seeing. This is going to take months. And how do they even know that they're testing the right thing? How do they even know? It's a big thing. And they won't even know what are they learning in this case. They're going to do an awful lot of work that's unnecessary, but we think it matters. So we always want to think our MVPs is the smallest prototype required to answer the question that we need to know right now. Not all the questions. The question we need to know right now is, should we keep going? Know your business. Stressing this again. Anything we're building needs to service what the business is there for. I've had this happen before too, when I was in pre-sales, or not in pre-sales, when I moved into customer success at Chef. I had a customer that I kind of inherited, and they were having adoption problems, right? They had bought, 10, 15,000 nodes of Chef, and when I came in, they had, over a year, they deployed about 52, right? So I said, okay, so I want to understand this. I was like, so what's your goal? Well, our goal is to install all of the Chef that we bought. I'm like, that's not your goal. That's my goal. My goal is that you buy more of it. But if your business goal is to install the software you paid for, that's kind of backwards, right? You probably shouldn't have bought it in the first place. So you want to distill down. Everything you're doing needs to go back to a business outcome. How does this product you're creating, whether it's a continuous delivery pipeline, whether it's a better way to order printers, anybody have to deal with people who order printers? I mean, I give examples of stuff that I'm like, God, I hope nobody has to do this anymore. It's sort of like my example of people wanting to turn the print spooler off on their Windows NT machines. I always give it as an example, because I worked for a company once that hated that, right? So the thing is, you also are going to need to convince your stakeholders that you understand their constraints. There's a lot of stakeholders, and there's a difference between a stakeholder and a customer. Customer is someone who's consuming this. Stakeholder is someone who gives a shit about it, either because they're impacted or they're going to get some indirect value. And stakeholders have constraints. They have things that make things hard. And usually when you're coming in and wanting to make some kind of a change, especially a change that might look a little radical, you're going to assume that you haven't thought through everything. So you want to say, hey, stakeholder, I hear you. It's okay, I hear you. It's active listening. This is good stuff, right? This is the empathy part of DevOps that we're doing right now. And I understand those constraints, and I'm going to make a deal with you. I'm going to support those constraints. I'm not going to sell you down the river. My solution is going to account for that because I know they're important. Know your customer. This is different than knowing the business. You got to know the business, but you need to know your customer. So why do they do what they do? These people who are using it, if you're building this continuous delivery pipeline, maybe your customers are software engineers or product owners of your software product. Why do they do what they do? And what exactly do they do? Which is why I put up the office space thing. It's, what would you say you do here, Bob, right? So a lot of times we think we know what they do, but we don't. And we certainly don't know why. Keep gathering feedback. Now, does this mean that you should put an NPS survey at the end of every time someone commits code? I would love someone to write a Jenkins plugin that's like the customer satisfaction survey. How likely are you to recommend this pipeline to a friend or family? Would you use this pipeline again? This is hard when you talk about software, about solutions like this, because people hate this shit, right? Like, how do you get feedback? This is a problem that we have, like at PagerDuty, because chances are, if you're using our product, something bad is probably happening to you, right? Most people are in PagerDuty, they're probably solving a problem. So our problem, it's not about collecting feedback, but it's about how do we surface new features. Like usually you might be into a thing and it's like, oh, hey, I noticed you're doing this. It's like Clippy. Nobody wants to see Clippy when production's down. So you think about how can you gather that feedback, but you're continually gathering it because you know what? You're never done. So always be doing discovery. So if you work, and not every infrastructure or process team works in a completely agile setup. You might work in some kind of Kanban, but you have some way that you have your work streams structured. You should have just as much or a close amount discovery-related stories or work or whatever you call them as delivery stuff. It's not just about what you're shipping, because it's not like, okay, we learned a bunch of stuff, and now we're going to stop thinking about new ideas for a while, and we're going to go ship all this stuff, and then we're going to come back and we're going to do another cycle. You have to kind of parallel them a little bit. And that can be tricky because we know that multitasking is a myth. So it doesn't mean try to work on them both on the same day, but in the same amount of work stream, make sure you're thinking about what's coming. You're doing that discovery work because it's very easy to put this stuff off. And as much as, my friend and colleague Michael Ducey likes to say, if you put things off to the last minute, it'll only take a minute. Procrastinating on discovery is not a good solution. Avoid analysis paralysis. This happens a lot. I had a customer at Chef, an incredibly large enterprise, just taking them forever to get some of their DevOps transformation going because they want to think about every corner case they might ever possibly hit. And it makes sense because they're in a highly regulated industry and they're scared, right? Because they're used to someone getting thrown under the bus when anything goes wrong. So you're always thinking about the blankety blank ifs. So that's the thing. Every time you find yourself saying, well, what if this happened? Or what if we hit this corner case? I want you to imagine Samuel L. Jackson as Jules saying, I don't want to hear about the ifs. Because that's the thing. You don't know what they are and you're never going to find them all. So just be okay with that. Just let it wash over you and go through you. There's some quote about letting you face your fear. I should have written it down. It's in, let your fear face it. Let it come through you. Let it go behind you. It's cool. Let it have its moment. And you move on. That's the same thing true with the ifs. Let the ifs have their moment and then they move on. Here's the thing. You're never going to be done, okay? Products are never done. That's okay. Emily's mom is still going to love you. She's rooting for you. So am I. If you have questions, we can talk about that. I'm going to be around for the rest of the conference. I love open spaces. I love the hallway track. So I'd like to hear some of the things that you might be doing that are along this line, some ideas you might have around that. A couple places to see. So like I'm on Twitter. I'm Matt Stratton. That's where I'm on the GitHubs. Arrested DevOps is my podcast. I've got some stickers I'll have. And I put where I am, where I've been up on my website there. That's my daughter. So because I needed a picture. So anyway, so thank you, everybody.